There is a man who ran 100 miles on 2 broken legs. A man who did over 4,000 pull-ups in under 17 hours. A man who went from 300 pounds, infested with cockroaches in his apartment, working a dead-end job spraying pesticides at night, to becoming a Navy SEAL, an ultra-marathon runner, and one of the most mentally durable human beings ever documented. And the strangest part? He was not born special. He was not gifted. He did not have better genes, better circumstances, or better luck than you. So what actually happened to David Goggins? Most people look at him and think, willpower, discipline, grind. They buy the book, highlight the quotes, post the clips, and then nothing changes. Because what they missed, what almost everyone misses, are the 7 things operating underneath everything Goggins says. 7 mechanisms so deep, so psychological, so brutally precise, that once you understand them, you will never look at your own life the same way again. This is not a motivational video. This is a dissection. Secret number 1. He did not improve the old version of himself. He killed it. This is the part nobody talks about. Most people trying to change their life are attempting to renovate an old building. They repaint the walls, they change the furniture, they add a new habit here, remove a bad habit there, but the foundation, the identity, stays exactly the same. Goggins did something different. He looked at who he was and decided that person had to die. Psychologists call this self-concept disruption. Your brain does not change deep behavioral patterns simply because you want it to. It changes when the identity that was producing those patterns collapses entirely. As long as you still see yourself as the same person, your nervous system will keep returning to the same behaviors. It is not weakness, it is architecture. Roy Baumeister, one of the leading researchers in self-regulation at Florida State University, spent decades studying why people fail to change. His conclusion was stark. The brain resists identity shifts because identity is a survival mechanism. It knows who you are, and it will fight to keep you that way. Goggins broke through that by accepting something most people are not willing to accept, that the person he had been was not worth saving, not repairing, not upgrading, erasing. And that decision, that specific, ruthless decision, is where everything else began. Secret number 2. The mirror was not about motivation. It was about forcing a confrontation. You have probably heard about the accountability mirror. Goggins would look at himself every morning and say out loud exactly what he was, what he had failed at, and what he was going to do that day. People hear that and think it is a confidence exercise. It is the opposite. It is a confrontation with cognitive dissonance. Here is what that means. Your brain maintains a story about who you are. And when your behavior contradicts that story, your brain does something quietly dangerous. It adjusts the story to protect your comfort. It rationalizes. It minimizes. It makes excuses that feel completely logical. Baumeister's research shows that humans will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid an honest assessment of themselves. Not because they are lazy, because the truth about who you are creates real psychological pain, and your brain treats that pain the same way it treats physical danger. It tries to escape it. Goggins removed the escape route. By speaking the truth out loud to his own face every single day, he forced his brain to hold 2 contradictory realities at the same time, who he said he was and who he was actually being. That tension became unbearable, and unbearable tension is the actual engine of change. Not inspiration, discomfort that has nowhere to go. Secret number 3. When your body says stop, you are only 40% done. This one will change how you think about exhaustion permanently. When you hit a wall during a run, a workout, a hard project, a conversation you want to escape, your body sends a signal so convincing that stopping feels like the only rational option. It feels like a physical limit. It feels like the edge. It is not. Neuroscientist David Eagleman at Stanford and sports scientist Samuele Marcora at the University of Kent have both documented the same phenomenon through different research paths. The brain installs a governor, a protective ceiling. It shuts you down not at your real limit, but at a point it calculates as safe, usually around 40% of your actual capacity. Marcora's studies on perceived effort showed something remarkable. Athletes who were told they were almost done performed significantly better than athletes who were not given that information, even when the actual physical conditions were identical. The limit was not in the muscle. It was in the perception of the limit. Goggins discovered this the same way most real knowledge gets discovered, through lived suffering. He kept going past the point where he was supposed to stop, and he found that there was more, much more. And every time he pushed past that ceiling, the ceiling moved. That is not metaphor. That is neurological recalibration. The brain learns where the real edge is by being forced past the manufactured one, and over time, your governor gets recalibrated upward. But here is what nobody tells you. You cannot do this once and expect transformation. It requires repetition, systematic, intentional suffering, which brings you to secret 4. Secret number 4. He did not survive pain, he weaponized it. There's a difference between tolerating discomfort and using it as raw material. Most people who try hard endure pain as a cost. They grit their teeth and get through it. Goggins treats pain as an ingredient, something he deliberately seeks, doses, and converts. Researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, studying what they call stress inoculation, found that deliberate, repeated exposure to controlled discomfort produces lasting changes in the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for the fear response. When you expose yourself to hard things on purpose, your brain gradually recategorizes those experiences. What once triggered panic begins to trigger focus. What once meant danger begins to mean opportunity. This is the same principle behind military psychological training. You do not prepare soldiers for fear by keeping them comfortable. You vaccinate them against it by exposing them to it in increasing doses until the fear response is restructured at the neurological level. Goggins did this to himself, voluntarily, without anyone asking him to. Cold water, long runs in the dark, races nobody else would enter, workouts that most people would call abuse. He was not punishing himself. He was building a completely different nervous system, one that responds to pressure the way a trained fighter responds to a punch, not with panic, with engagement. The question is not whether this is extreme. The question is what it says about your current relationship with discomfort, and whether the things you are avoiding are actually protecting you or just keeping you exactly where you are. Secret number 5. He did not chase results. He became a different person. This is the deepest secret of all. Think about the last time you tried to change something about yourself. Maybe you wanted to exercise more, eat better, wake up earlier, work harder. What did you focus on? The result, the outcome, the goal. And what happened after a few weeks when the motivation faded? Here is the truth that behavioral scientist James Clear spent years documenting. Real behavioral change is not a change in output. It is a change in identity. The most durable transformations in human behavior happen when a person stops trying to achieve something and starts becoming someone. The difference sounds subtle. It is not. When your goal is to run a marathon, every training session is a sacrifice, a cost, something you push yourself to do. But when your identity is that of a runner, when you genuinely believe that you are the kind of person who runs, every session is just an expression of who you already are. The discipline becomes natural. The behavior becomes automatic because you are not forcing yourself to act against your nature. You are acting in alignment with it. Carl Jung identified the same mechanism from a completely different angle decades earlier. He called it the persona, the identity structure that organizes behavior. When the persona shifts, behavior reorganizes itself around the new center without requiring constant, conscious effort. Goggins did not work hard to be disciplined. He became someone for whom softness was not an option. He restructured who he was at the identity level, and his behavior simply followed. The brutal implication of this is that you can have all the tools, all the routines, all the habits, and still fail completely if you never change the answer to the question, who are you? Secret number 6. He built evidence, not inspiration. There is a reason motivational videos do not work long term. Inspiration is a feeling, and feelings are temporary by design. They come, they go, and your brain, which is wired for efficiency, returns to its default patterns the moment the feeling fades. What Goggins built instead was a physical archive of proof. Every small win documented, every hard thing completed, not celebrated, recorded, cataloged, stored as evidence in what he calls the cookie jar, a mental and written record of every difficult thing he had ever survived. Timothy Wilson, a psychology researcher at the University of Virginia, has spent decades studying how writing about difficult experiences reorganizes how the brain processes them. His work shows that when you articulate hard experiences in written form, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for narrative and identity, actively reframes those experiences as part of a coherent, resilient story of yourself. In other words, writing your wins does not just feel good. It physically rewires how your brain categorizes who you are. Every time Goggins faced a new impossible moment, he did not reach for motivation. He reached for evidence. His brain had a library of proof that he was the kind of person who gets through impossible things. And that proof was more powerful than any feeling. You cannot borrow someone else's evidence. You cannot be inspired into having it. You have to go earn it, one documented hard thing at a time. Secret number 7. He runs every day as if his future self is watching. This is the one that almost nobody talks about. At some point, Goggins began making decisions not for who he was, but for who he was going to become. He developed a permanent internal observer, a version of himself that exists in the future, looking back at the current moment with either respect or contempt. Every decision passes through that filter. Sports psychologist Michael Gervais, who works with elite military units and world-class athletes, calls this future self-priming. The practice of projecting a detailed, specific image of your future identity into your present moment and allowing that identity to pull your behavior forward. The neuroscience behind it is significant. When you vividly imagine a future version of yourself with enough detail and emotional specificity, your brain begins to treat that future self as a real social entity, almost like another person whose judgment matters to you. Research from UCLA's neuroscience division showed that most people's brains treat their future selves the same way they treat strangers, which is why it is so easy to let your future self down. You barely know them. But Goggins made his future self intimate, personal, someone whose opinion he could not escape. And that relationship became a constant source of behavioral pressure, not from the outside, not from a coach or an audience, but from inside, from a version of himself he was in a permanent conversation with. Every soft choice became a betrayal of that relationship. Every hard choice became a promise kept. Now here is the part that matters most. These 7 secrets are not the story of a man who was different from you. They are the story of a man who looked at the exact same raw material you have: fear, pain, doubt, a history of failure, and decided to use it differently. Your brain has a governor. Your identity is driving your behavior right now. Your pain is either building you or protecting you from being built. Your future self exists somewhere in front of you, already judging today. The question is not what David Goggins did. The question is which version of yourself you are protecting right now, and whether that version deserves your loyalty. Because somewhere, at the beginning of all of this, there was a 300-pound man staring at cockroaches on his kitchen floor, about to decide that the person looking back at him in the mirror was worth more than the story he had been living.